Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Manidhi
Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksura Militanyena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vichaitannamanavistam Stavidanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Karamaya Dadanti Swapadanti Kam. First of all, I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Diksha and Shiksha Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Satara Satasi Simad Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Then I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Shiksha and Sannyas Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Asatara Satasi Simad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Shiksha Gurus, Srila Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj and Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharti Goswami Maharaj. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of the Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Prabhupada, Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, and Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I offer my humble obeisances unto Sri Krishna, the speaker of Bhagavad Gita. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of Arjuna, the speaker of, hearer of Bhagavad Gita. I offer my obeisances unto the feet of Sri Bhagavad Gita itself. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of the great acharyas who've written commentaries on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Sri Sridhar Swami Pad, and also Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Madhvacharya, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Baldev Vijabhushan, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, and Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. I offer my humble obeisances to all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who are present here today. Dandavat Pranam. So, there are 3 divisions to the Gita. The first 6 chapters, the last 6 chapters, and the middle 6 chapters. The first 6 chapters are Nishkam Karma Yoga, the middle 6 are Bhakti Yoga, the last 6 are Jnana Yoga. We finished the first 6 and the second 6. And now we're in the last division. And the conversation is being driven by the questions of Arjuna to Sri Krishna, which are listed in the 54th verse of the 2nd chapter in the purport by Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. So the last question that we had, 12.1, who is more perfect, he who performs bhajan to your personal form, or he who is worshipping your impersonal, unmanifest form? And Krishna spends the 12th chapter, he answers that question immediately in verses 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then starting in 6, 7, and 8, he explains about Rag Bhakti, and then he explains about Vaidhi Bhakti, and Karma Mishra Bhakti, and Gyan Mishra Bhakti, and the different forms of Bhakti. He explains all the different forms of Bhakti, and the sacrifices you have to make advancement in spiritual life. So that 12th chapter is about Bhakti Yoga. Now we're going to begin the 13th chapter. And the 13th chapter is going to be question number 13, in which Arjuna asks about Prakriti Purusha. Now, we say that these 6 chapters are about Jnana Yoga. Why? Because what's going on is that Krishna has just explained that, as I just said, Krishna has explained about the different levels of bhakti. And most people are not going to be performing Rag Bhakti on a Bhav Bhakti platform. most people are going to be performing Vaidhi Bhakti or Karma Mishra or Jnana Mishra Bhakti. They're going to be performing some lower stage of Bhakti. So for those people, they have to tread very carefully, make the balance between performing the conditional activities in the world and the constitutional activities of their soul. They have to do both, as Prabhupada talks about in the 9th chapter, verse number 30, in the commentary, Apichet Sudarachara. So now, in these 6 chapters here, Krishna explains the world. He explains how it works, so that you understand how to manage your life within the material world while you're practicing bhakti. First, he explains about Sankhya, about the nature of the material universe in the 13th chapter. Then in the 14th chapter, he explains about the modes of material nature. Then in the 15th chapter, he explains about how this entire material world is a perverted reflection of the original spiritual world and what the nature of the soul and its relationship with God is. Then in the 16th chapter, he talks about the divine and demoniac persons, because we need to know if we're going to associate with people in this world while we're on the path of bhakti, we want to associate with devotees and people who are pious, divine people. We want to avoid the demoniac persons, the asuras, those persons who are performing acts against the principles of the Vedas. And then in the 17th chapter, he divides up all the activities based on the modes of nature. Charity in the mode of ignorance, charity in the mode of passion, charity in the mode of goodness. Austerity in the mode of ignorance, austerity in the mode of passion, austerity in the mode of goodness. Worship in the mode of ignorance, worship in the mode of passion, worship in the mode of goodness. So by doing this, you understand the nature of each activity being stimulated by a different mode of material nature. And then you understand that based on your position as a devotee, trying to be Brahminical and spiritual, that you should be doing all the things, at least in the mode of goodness. All right, so now we're going to begin. Want to click over there? Now we're going to begin in a few minutes here. In a minute. Just get a little spray. So we'll begin by reading these verses, verse 1 and 2, which is, and 3, which are the questions by Arjuna. No, verse 1 and 2 is the question by Arjuna. And then verse 3 is the answer, beginning of the answer. Arjuna Vacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Shetram Shetragnam Evacha Etad Veditam Ichami Jnanam Gneyam Chakeshava Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Sariram Kunteya Shetram Iti Abadiyate Etadyo Vetitam Prahu Shetragna Iti Tadvida. So Arjuna asks the question in verse 1, and Krishna gives answer in verse 2 and verse 3. Oh, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the end of knowledge. The blessed Lord then said, this body O son of Kunti, Arjuna, is called the field. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. So here he's explaining that this physical body is the field, okay? And the knower of the field is the individual soul. You, the soul, within the subtle body, expressing your consciousness, you are the knower of this body. And then he's going to explain who's the knower of all the bodies. Kshetragnam chapimam vidi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragnayor jnanam yathaj jnanam matam mama. O sign of Bharat, Arjuna, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So this is the definition of knowledge. Understanding the difference between the body, the soul, and the controller and owner of both, Krishna. We know our body. We are the knower of our field. Madhusudan knows his body. I know my body. I don't feel Madhusudan's pain. He doesn't feel my pain. This is the nature. We only understand, we only know, we're only conscious of our own body. What we think, what we feel. You understand? But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who's also inside this body, who's inside the subtle body, accompanying the soul on the sojourn, like two birds in a tree. He is Paramatma. He knows everybody. He knows Madhusudan's body, my body, Sadhananda's body, Sophia's body, Kanak Manjari's body. Everybody's body he knows. All the bodies he knows. He knows how all the bodies feel, how they think, how they desire. He knows all the bodies. And one who understands this body and its owner is called knowledge. This is called knowledge. Knowledge means to understand the difference between the body, the soul, and the controller and owner of both. Srila Prabhupada gives one verse from the Vedic literature. Kshetrani hi sarirani bijam chapi shubha shubhe tani vetti sa yogatma tata kshetragna uchyate. This body is called the kshetra, the field. And within it, the body, dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the owner of activities, and the supreme owner of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literatures as jnanam, knowledge. Knowledge means to understand matter and spirit and the controller of both. This is jnanam. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the supersoul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the soul, the field of activity, and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, the enjoyer, and Ishwar, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. Very, very important to understand. This is the message that Srila Prabhupada keeps hammering on again and again and again in all of his purports. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted and what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. That knowledge of the field of activities and or the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings, especially in Vedanta Sutra, and is presented with all reasoning as to the cause and the effect. And now, he's going to speak about the Mahabhut, 5 great elements. Mahabhutani ahankaro. The great elements, plus the ahankara, the false ego. Buddhir avyaktam evacha. And the intelligence, the unmanifested. Indriyani daksh dasai kamcha. Pancha chandriya gochara. 5 great elements, the false ego, the intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. So here he's describing Sankhya Yoga, the analytical assessment of all the different parts of nature. This is also similarly explained in Vaisheshika. But the conclusion in Vaisheshika is that everything comes down to atomic energy. Where in Sankhya, they say that everything comes down to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's the source of the souls and the material nature through his energies. So, we follow Sankhya. We follow this. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements, the Mahabhut. Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. And then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. Then 5 working senses, voice, legs, hands, the anus, and the genitals. And then above the senses there is the mind, which is within, and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. So it manifests one after the other, beginning from the most subtle down to the gross. Everything begins with the subtle and goes down to the gross. This is explained in 3:26:32. The verse is given, and then in the purport. So, in that 26th chapter, it explains how the first thing that manifests from the pradhan, the undifferentiated material nature. Pradhan is jud, dead matter. So from this dead matter, from this undifferentiated material nature, the first thing that manifests is pure consciousness. And that pure consciousness becomes contaminated by the manifestation of the modes of material nature. By the false ego. So the false ego in the mode of goodness produces the mind. False ego in the mode of passion produces the intelligence. false ego in the mode of ignorance produces sound. And from sound comes the subtle manifestation, the most subtle of the gross material elements, ether. And from ether comes the ear for hearing, and the sense of hearing, and the voice box to make sound. Then, how will the sound be transferred from the voice box to the ear? This is part of my lecture on sound, because if I were to wall off this room, as our scientist, Madhusudan, can attest to, and I sucked out all of the air in this room and there was only space, when I spoke, you wouldn't be able to hear me because nothing could carry without air. The air carries the sound. So first, the sense of hearing is there, and the instrument for hearing, the ear, is there, and the instrument for making the sound, the voice box, is there. But now it has to be carried. So the next element, air. And from air, we have the sense of touch, okay? And the hand, okay, for touching, the skin, okay? So that's the next thing. But now, this is a very cold place. So the hand has to have some kind of warmth. The skin has to have warmth. Next element, fire. Fire comes sight, seeing. Okay? And comes the eye. And the leg, the working sense, to carry. It brings you to the object that you see so you can grasp it with your hand and explain it to others with your voice box. You follow? Now, if it's only fire, everything will blow up. Something has to temper the fire. So next element, water. From water, then we have the thirst, drink, tasting, taste, the sense of taste. So taste is the sense that comes about, okay? First you have hearing, then you have touching, then you have seeing, now you have tasting. So taste, and the tongue, which is the upper genital and the lower genital, okay? The lower tongue. Upper tongue, lower tongue. Lower tongue is the genital. Upper tongue is the upper tongue. Taste, okay? Two tongues, upper and lower. We taste food, we taste water, we taste pleasure with the tongue by eating, and we taste other pleasure by the lower tongue, the genital. So it was about taste, tasting pleasure. Then, after this, then comes earth. And earth, then we get sense of smell, and we get the nose, okay? And with the nose, then we get the anus, is the working sense, okay? So in Ayurvedic medicine, based on this anatomy and physiology, we know that when the nose is congested, that means the colon is congested. So then, first thing, recommend something to clean the bowel, then the nose gets clear. Understand? So, Prabhupada was once walking on his morning walk, and there was all these flowers. And he said, each flower has a different fragrance. From where it gets the fragrance? And nobody knew the answer. So from the earth. All the fragrances are in the earth. And then depending on the seed, it extracts that particular fragrance and manifests it. Prabhupada explained. So this is, okay, and then mind. Mind is the subtle body, subtle sense. Mind, intelligence, false ego. But mind is the connector, okay? The false ego is what's driving you to enjoy this body. And the intelligence, Prabhupada said, is right next to the soul. It helps you to discriminate between things. You know what is what and what is not. It's analytical. And the mind is like the software that runs everything. And the intelligence is the programmer. So the intelligence programs the mind, then the mind runs, and it follows the program. And then guides the senses, and then the senses work. So in this way. So the subtle body sends the messages through the chakras to the brain and to the endocrine system. Each chakra is connected to a different endocrine gland. That stimulates the endocrine gland to produce what endocrine means, internally secreting glands. Glands that secrete hormones and biochemicals internally. So each chakra is connected with a different endocrine gland connected to the subtle body. So the impulse is sent from the subtle body through the chakras to the gross body, and then the neurological activity, the brain chemicals, the endocrine glands, they all get stimulated to produce the different chemicals we need to make the body work. This is verified by Dr. Deepak Chopra, who is both an MD endocrinologist and an Ayurvedic practitioner. So he has explained how this is connected. And how can we change everything? Srila Prabhupada explains in this previous purport, transcendental to all the fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. Anandamaya Vyasat. In the Vedanta Sutra, also, the Supreme is called Anandamaya Vyasat. Supreme Personality is Godhead, is full of joy. And to enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into the different subtle sheaths in the body. Vijnanamoya, which is here, in this area. And Pranamoya, which is here, in the Swadhisthana chakra. Jnanamoya, which is here, in the heart chakra area. And Anamoya, which is here, in the Muladhara chakra area. This is another subtle covering over the soul. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamoya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamoya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he becomes perfect. This is the real understanding. So, after explaining all these different ingredients, earth, water, fire, air, ether, 5, mind, intelligence, and false ego, 8, then the unmanifest modes of nature, 9, then the 5 senses, touching, tasting, smelling, seeing, hearing, then 5 sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and tongue, and then the voice, the legs, the hands, the anus, and the genitals. So in this way, 24 altogether. 24. The aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. This is Kshetrajna. This is the field. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activities. Then after these, there is desire, hatred, pleasure, and pain. Which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness and conviction, are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. So the consciousness comes first. When we look at the evolvement of the elements from the pradhan, the undifferentiated mass of matter, which is neither created nor destroyed, the first thing that comes out is consciousness. Then the false ego, then the intelligence, and the mind, like this, mind, intelligence, and sound, and then the grosser elements. So this is the understanding how everything is developing. It is developing from the most subtle, from the consciousness. Here he says, the living symptoms represented by consciousness and conviction are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, intelligence. And then these subtle elements are included within the field of activities. And then in the 5 great elements are the gross representation of the subtle false ego. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Okay? So this is the gross representation. But this is why your gross physical body is a manifestation of the desires and the karma of your subtle body and consciousness. You follow? So therefore, you have a particular body. She has another body. She another. Me another. Him another. We have some conception that we developed over a period of time. Many, many births. Then we are awarded a particular body. And that body has a set of karmic responses. You understand? And so like this, the body is functioning in a descending manner. Consciousness to the subtle body to the chakras, to the gross physical body. It descends. And this is how the gross physical body functions. The 5 great elements are gross representations of the subtle false ego. Our subtle false ego has a certain desire to look a certain way and be a certain way. This is why when we do see what's called a ghost, what is a ghost? A ghost is nothing more than the astral body which has no physical body. And it's headed by the false ego. Therefore, you see the ghost of a young girl. Why? Because the false ego is still projecting into the world the last physical form that it was inhabiting. You understand? Well, you see another ghost of an old man. Why? Because that's the last physical form it was inhabiting. So the false ego is projecting that form. So this is what happens. False ego maintains the view of that form or the vision of that form, even though it's no longer in that physical body. You follow? The body is the representation of all these factors. The 24 elements. And there are changes of the body which are 6 in number. Which are the 6 I just mentioned before? The 6 symptoms of life. Who remembers? Birth, growth, maintenance, giving off byproducts, dwindling or decay, and at the last stage, death. Therefore, the field of this material nature is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, its proprietor, the soul, is different. Now, Krishna is going to give advice about certain qualities which we should develop if we want to make advancement in spiritual life. Humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control. Renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, non-attachment to children, wife, home, and the rest, and even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me, resorting to solitary places, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I thus declare to be knowledge, and what is contrary to these items is ignorance. Srila Prabhupada very clearly enunciates what is knowledge and what is ignorance. This is a very long purport in which he describes all of these different qualities: cleanliness, steadiness, tolerance, humility, all. Every item he explains. I shall now explain the knowable. Nayam yat tat pravakshami yajgnatva mritam ashnute anadimat param brahma nasatan nasaruchate. I shall now explain this knowledge, knowing which you will taste the eternal. This is beginningless, and it is subordinate to me. Krishna is saying that the material energy is subordinate to him. It is called Brahman, the spirit, and it lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. I shall now explain to you the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. This is beginningless, and it is subordinate to me. It is called Brahman, the spirit, and it lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So this is the Brahman effulgence of Krishna, which is the foundation of the material world. The material world rests on it, and it rests on Krishna. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. That'll be in chapter 14. So Prabhupada makes the point. The Lord has explained the field of activities and the knower of the field. He has also explained the process of knowing the knower of the field of activities. Now he is explaining the knowable, both the soul and the supersoul, respectively. By knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the supersoul, one can relish the nectar of life. As explained in the second chapter, the living entity is eternal. This is also confirmed here. There is no specific date at which the jiva was born, nor can anyone trace out the history of the jivatma's manifestation from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it is beginningless. The Vedic literature confirms this. Najayate mriyate va vipas chit. the knower of the body, is never born and never dies, and he is full of knowledge. The Supreme Lord is also stated in the Vedic literature as Pradhan Kshetrajna Patir Gunesha. The Supreme Lord, as the Supersoul, is the chief knower of the body, and he is the master of the three modes of material nature. In the Smriti it is said, Dasabhuto Harer Eva Nan Yasvaiva Kadachana. The living entities are eternally in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed by Lord Chaitanya in his teachings. Therefore, the description of Brahman mentioned in this verse is in relation to the individual soul. And when the word Brahman is applied to the living entity, it is understood that he is Vijnanam Brahma as opposed to Ananta Brahma. Ananta Brahma is the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead. So the personality of Godhead, Krishna, is Ananta Brahma, unlimited supreme person. The Jiva is Brahman because he is within the effulgence of Krishna. This is explained in the Sri Upanishads, in Mantra 16 and Mantra 17, how the Jiva is a spark in the ocean of the Brahman effulgence of Krishna. So then, after this, Krishna starts explaining his nature as the all-pervading Supersoul. Because the Supersoul is an important point. We have to understand that the soul is not the supreme controller. The supreme controller is the Supersoul. Therefore, the Supersoul has to be identified. So he explains, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes and faces, and he hears everything. In this way, the Supersoul exists. The Supersoul is the original source of all the senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. So we see here that in this verse, Krishna is saying that he's transcendental to material nature, and yet he's the controller of material nature. Maya dyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Mama Maya, it is my Maya, it is my material energy. The modes of material nature are mine. I own them, I control them, I am the master of them. How? Through my energies. Through my different energies. So, the Supersoul is the original source of all senses. Yes, and he was without senses. He is unattached, although he's the maintainer of all living beings. Yes, we read this verse. The Supreme Truth exists both internally and externally, in the moving and the non-moving. He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. When the pradhan, the undifferentiated elements of the material nature, are evolving into separating into the different 24 elements, starting with consciousness and then the false ego and the modes of material nature, the intelligence, the mind, sound, earth, water, fire, air, ether, etc., etc. As all that is evolving, okay? So, therefore, the Supersoul, he's in every atom and in between every atom. He's everywhere. That's why he's saying everywhere are his hands and legs. He's everywhere. And his presence is what maintains the individual elements in their nature and what maintains all the forms that we see in the material world for some period of time. Everything is maintained by the presence of Supersoul. He's the glue that keeps everything together, because this is inanimate object. It has no sentient consciousness. We are sentient because we, the soul, are present, and we are animating this body. And he is keeping the body together. There's so many things that happen in the body that we're not aware of. Our breathing, our heartbeat, our going to the bathroom. We don't think about it. It just happens. All of it just happens. How is that happening? Supersoul. Supersoul also through the agency of the different demigods and the devas in the world, in the universe. So, although far, far away, he is also very near. Krishna is very near because he's in every atom, yet far, far away. He is in the heart of all living beings. Okay? Now, although the Supersoul appears to be divided, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it's to be understood that he devours and develops all. So the Supersoul is everywhere, and it appears that he's in many different parts, but actually it's one. Therefore, Krishna says, I maintain this universe by a fragment of myself. Then we understand that the Supersoul, although situated as one, and although the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that everything is devoured and developed by him, as Arjuna saw when he looked at the Vishvarup. When he looked at the universal form, he saw all the people on the battlefield being devoured by Krishna, and he saw that everyone who had surrendered to Krishna, the 5 Pandavas, they would be taken care of and maintained. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge. He is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Thus, the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. This is referring back to that famous verse, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vetti tattvata. That's in the 4th chapter of the Gita. Anyone who knows the transcendental nature of my birth and activities, they thus attain me at the time of death. My devotees can understand this thoroughly, and thus they attain my nature. What do they understand thoroughly? That the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described in the Bhagavad Gita, by Krishna, and only the devotees can understand this thoroughly, and thus they attain to Krishna's nature. This is 19. Material nature in the living entity should be understood to be beginningless. The transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. So, the material energy, as we said before, the pradhan, the undifferentiated energy, has no beginning and no end. But the forms that it manifests do. And that happens by the presence of the soul and the supersoul. So here he's stating material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless, and they are. There's no beginning to material nature. There's no beginning to the jiva, the soul. They're eternal. The transformations in the modes of matter are products of material nature. So the transformations that we go through as individual souls within the body, influenced by the three modes of nature and the different aspects, those transformations that we go through, that is all part of the material nature, okay? All the transformations are material nature. And what is spiritual is related to us, the soul, the Supreme Soul. Nature is said to be the cause of all material activities and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in the world. So this is the answer to your question. Why one man gets hit by the car, other man gets hit by the car, one brain doesn't work, other brain's still working. I got hit when I was in the 3rd grade. I ran across the street because I was late to go home, and I got hit in the head by a car and I was unconscious. And then they brought me to the hospital and blah, 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 blah. And I only remember running into the street, and I remember this woman who lived on our block, one of the Italian security patrol. All the Italian women on our block when we were kids, they would watch out for everybody else's kids. So one of these ladies was there. So she held me and I was crying in her arms. When I became conscious, I was standing erect and holding her and crying in her arms. But that's the only real effect that I had of being hit in the head by the car that I remember. Other than that, my brain has worked fine. But I met a man in India one time. He had an accident in a car and his head got smashed, and he became like a congenital idiot. He was not able to communicate or speak or be aware of the surroundings. He was just sort of sitting there like this. So his brain was affected. We both had the same thing. Here I am giving lectures and he's still sitting there. Why? Because karma. I had enough funds in my spiritual bank account, in my pious bank account, to pay off the debt and keep the machine working. He didn't. Thus, he remains unfunctionable. So, who's responsible for the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world? The living entity. This is karma. Based on previous activities and previous lives, we get certain bodies, and then based on those bodies, we have a certain set of karma or destiny, which we can change by the help of bhakti. Process of bhakti can wipe the slate clean. And material nature, Maya, Durga, she's the cause of all material activities and their effects. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is due to the association with the material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil amongst various species of life. Now, very important verse. Upadrashta anumantacha, bharata bhokta maheshvara, paramatmeti chapiyukto dehismin purushapara. In the dehi, dehi means body. In this body, there is dehismin purushapara, there's a Parampurusha, supreme enjoyer. Besides the soul, which is the enjoyer of this body, this field, there's a supreme enjoyer. And who is that supreme enjoyer? Paramatmeti, the Paramatma. Paramatma. He is the supreme enjoyer. This is said in the scriptures. Upadrashta Anumantacha. Overseer. Drashta means to see. I quoted those verses from the 11th chapter where Krishna is telling Arjuna, who can see, Naham Vederna Tapasana Dane Nana Chejaya, Sakyam Evam Vido Drashtam, Drashtavam Asimam Yata, how you can see me by this process. Ananya Bhakti. So, Upadrashta. They're seeing, drashta, and upadrashta. What is upadrashta? Overseeing. We are seeing, but Krishna is overseeing. A transcendental joyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and Anumanta. Anumanta means permitter. What is the Supersoul overseeing? He's overseeing our desires and the exercise of our minute independence, our minute free will, to enjoy the material nature. He's overseeing, and he's giving permission. Okay, yes, you may do, you may not do. You may do, yes, you have enough to pay from your karmic bank account of pious activities. You have enough to pay, so you can do. No, you don't have enough, you cannot do. Like this. Upadrashtanumantacha Bhartabhokta Maheshwara Paramatmeti Chapiyukto Dehismin Purushapara. In this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interactions of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth again here. He will not take birth again, regardless of the present position. He will not take birth again, regardless of his present position. Why? Because he understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interactions of the modes of nature. He understands. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata. Who knows me in truth, then he can come to me. The Supersoul is perceived by some through meditation, by some through cultivation of knowledge, and by others through working without fruitive desire. So, Prabhupada lays it out here. Krishna lays it out in the verse, and Prabhupada talks about how Arjuna is being informed by Krishna that the conditioned soul, the conditioned consciousness, can be divided into two classes for as far as men's search for self-realization is concerned. Those who are atheists, agnostics, and skeptics are beyond the sense of spiritual understanding. But there are others who are faithful in their understanding of spiritual life, and they are called workers who have renounced fruitive results. Those who always try to establish the doctrine of monism are also counted among the atheists and agnostics. In other words, only the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are really capable of spiritual understanding, because they understand that beyond the material nature, there is the spiritual world, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is explained as Paramatma. So this is the meaning of the presence of Supersoul everywhere. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. O chief of the Bharats, whatever you see in existence, both moving and non-moving, is only the combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. One who sees the Supersoul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the Supersoul is ever destroyed, actually sees. Vijavanaya Sampane, that verse, the Brahmin, the learned Brahmin, sees the elephant, the dog eater, the Brahmin, everyone, he sees them all equal. Why? Because he sees the soul and the Supersoul. He doesn't see the body. One who sees the Supersoul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the Supersoul are ever destroyed, is the actual seer. One who sees the Supersoul in every living being and equal everywhere, does not degrade himself by his mind, thus he approaches the transcendental destination. One who can see that all the activities performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. So we should understand that the activities we're performing are being performed not by us, not by the soul. The soul remains uncontaminated and not involved directly, but indirectly through the consciousness emanating from the soul, which animates the subtle body, which animates the gross body. So one who can see that all activities are performed by the body is performing the prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa. The influence of the modes of nature causes the body to act and behave in certain ways. So the consciousness becomes polluted. It sends the direction to the mind, to the subtle body, which then dictates to the senses to enjoy in a certain way. This is the position. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created by material nature, and that the self, the soul, does nothing, he is the actual seer. When a sensible man ceases to see different identities, which are due to different material bodies, he attains to the Brahman conception. Thus he sees the beings are expanded everywhere. Those with the vision of eternality can see that the soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is it entangled. We only have 2 more verses. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything. So although it is all-pervading, so the sky is all-pervading, it's everywhere, yet it does not mix with anything. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahman vision does not mix with the body, though situated in the body. O son of Bharat, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity with the body illuminate the entire body by consciousness. And this is where Prabhupada says, When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body. And as soon as the soul is passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. So, Prabhupada one time gave a lecture at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, very big school. So, he began the lecture by saying, okay, a person dies just now. Body is dead. All the biochemicals are there. All the chemicals are still there. Everything is still there, exactly as it was 1 second before. Only now the body's dead, and before it was living. What is the difference between the dead body and the living body? No one could answer. Then Prabhupada explained about the soul. And he explained that there's the soul and the super soul. You and Krishna, that they're separate. He explained all of this. Then at the end, some long-haired, hippie, impersonalist kind of guy got up and said, isn't it that we're all God? We're all God, right? I mean, you're talking about the soul, the super soul, this and that, but in fact, we're all God. It's all one, man. It's all God. We're all God, right? So Prabhupada, he didn't say anything for a minute. He looked up at him and he said, so you want all of us to believe that you are God? And the whole class started to laugh. And the guy got really embarrassed and he walked out of the class. One who knowingly sees the difference between the body and the owner of the body and can understand the process of liberation from this bondage also attains the supreme goal of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this is the 13th chapter, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Now we've discussed that chapter. Tomorrow, we're going to get a deeper insight into how the material body is influenced by the modes of material nature when we do chapter 14. For tonight, we'll finish with the chapter 13, and we will continue tomorrow night. Thursday night, right? Tomorrow's Thursday or Friday? Friday. Sri. Okay, chapter 14. Now that will be the next question. The 14th question will be in the 14th chapter by Arjuna. Or maybe it's the 15th chapter. Maybe in the 15th. No, 14th chapter, 1421. And the 15th question is in the 17th chapter, and the 16th question is in the 18th chapter. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.